Imagine opening your eyes in ancient Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. The sun has only just risen, but the walls around you are already beginning to glow with heat. In a few hours, the streets outside could feel like an oven. There is no air conditioner humming in the next room. There is no electric fan, no refrigerator, no freezer, and not a single cube of ice waiting in a glass. And the worst part is that you cannot simply stay inside until sunset. You have work to do. You have water to carry, food to prepare, tools to move, fields to tend, walls to repair, or stone to shape. So the question is not whether ancient Egypt was hot. The real question is how millions of people managed to live, work, eat, sleep, and raise families in that heat for generation after generation. The answer was not one miraculous invention. It was an entire way of life built around the sun. The house, the clothes, the water jar, the food, the workday, and even the roof above your head all became part of the same survival system. And by the end of one brutally hot day, you would discover that the ancient Egyptians understood something many modern people forget. Sometimes the smartest way to survive an extreme environment is not to defeat it, but to design your life around it. Your first line of defense begins before you even step outside. It begins with the walls around you. At first glance, an ancient Egyptian mud brick house does not look like advanced technology. It looks simple, rough, and almost fragile compared with stone temples and royal tombs. But that simplicity hides one of its greatest advantages. Mud brick can slow the movement of heat. During the day, thick earthen walls absorb heat gradually, instead of allowing the inside of the house to become as hot as the air outside immediately. Think of the wall as a giant thermal delay. By the time the wall releases more of that stored heat, the outside temperature may already be falling. In other words, the house does not create cold air. It buys you time. And in a place where the difference between morning, midday, evening, and night can determine how comfortable you feel, time is incredibly valuable. Now imagine two houses standing beneath the same sun. One has thin walls that allow heat to rush inside quickly. The other has thick earthen walls that make the heat crawl. That is the first lesson of ancient Egyptian heat survival. Do not begin by trying to cool everything around you. Begin by slowing the heat down. But there is an obvious problem. A cool house cannot help very much if your work is outside. Sooner or later, you have to open the door and walk into the light. And when you do, the next defense is not a machine. It is shade. Modern people often think of cooling as something that happens after a space becomes hot. We let the sun pour through a window, then use a machine to remove the heat. In a world without machines, it makes more sense to stop as much of that heat as possible before it reaches you. Courtyards, walls, covered spaces, narrow passages, and carefully placed openings could all help control when direct sunlight entered a living space. A wall that throws a shadow across a courtyard is doing useful work every second of the day without consuming fuel. A roof that blocks the midday sun is more than shelter from rain. It is a permanent sun shield. The ancient Egyptian solution was not to make the desert cold. It was to create small islands where the sun had less power. That difference matters. Cooling air is expensive. Blocking sunlight is free. But now you have left the house completely. The road is bright, the ground is hot, and the sun is touching your body directly. You cannot carry a mud brick wall with you. So what is the next best thing? You wear one? Not literally, of course. But clothing can become a portable layer of protection. Linen was one of the most important textiles in ancient Egyptian life. It could be made light, breathable, and comfortable in a hot climate, and it also gave the skin protection from direct sunlight. That may sound strange if your first instinct in extreme heat is to remove as much clothing as possible. But bare skin under a powerful desert sun is not automatically the coolest option. A light layer that allows air to move while keeping intense sunlight off the skin can be extremely useful. Think of it as a tiny moving roof that follows you everywhere. The house blocks the sun when you are indoors. The cloth helps block it when you are not. So far, the system seems surprisingly effective. Thick walls slow the heat. Shade blocks part of it. Linen protects the body, but none of those things can stop you from sweating. And once the sweat begins, another problem starts quietly growing inside you. You are losing water. In the modern world, the solution seems obvious. Open a refrigerator and take out something cold. Ancient Egyptians had no refrigerator, but they did have pottery. And a simple clay vessel can do something that feels almost magical if you do not know the physics behind it. Some earthenware containers are slightly porous. A tiny amount of water can move toward the outer surface of the vessel. When that moisture evaporates into dry air, it carries heat away with it. The effect can help keep the water inside cooler than it would be in a sealed container sitting in the same conditions. There is no motor. There is no compressor. There is no cable running to a wall socket. There is only clay, water, moving air, and evaporation. It is not a modern refrigerator, and it should not be imagined as one, but the principle is powerful enough to feel like a refrigerator with no moving parts. The second jar will not give you ice water. It does not need to. Even a modest reduction in temperature can make drinking far more pleasant when everything around you is hot. Now you drink, and for a moment the problem feels solved. Then your body reminds you that sweat is not made of pure water. Every drop carries more than moisture away from you. It also carries salts and other electrolytes that your nerves and muscles depend on. Ancient Egyptians did not speak about sodium balance or sports hydration the way we do today. But they did eat foods that could replace energy and some of the minerals lost during hard work. Bread was one of the foundations of the Egyptian diet. For a laborer, bread was not a side dish placed beside a luxurious meal. It was fuel. Carbohydrates helped replace energy used during physical work, while salt in the diet could help replace part of what was lost through sweat. The workers did not need the word electrolyte. Their muscles only needed the material itself. And this is where another famous part of ancient Egyptian life enters the story. Beer. Today, many people think of beer as something you drink after work. In ancient Egypt, beer could be part of the food and ration system itself. It provided liquid, calories, and carbohydrates, and it appeared across many levels of Egyptian society. For workers receiving rations, bread and beer were not symbols of luxury. They were basic parts of daily life. That does not mean everyone spent the workday stumbling around drunk. The important point is that ancient Egyptian beer belonged to a very different food culture from the one many modern viewers imagine when they hear the word beer. So now the survival system has grown larger. The wall protects you from heat, the shade protects you from sunlight, the linen protects your skin, the jar helps keep water more pleasant to drink, bread restores energy, beer contributes liquid and calories. Yet even with all of that, there is one part of the day that no clever wall or clay jar can completely erase. Midday. When the sun reaches its most punishing position, the simplest strategy may be to stop pretending that every hour is equal. Modern schedules often force people to behave as though 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon are interchangeable. In a very hot climate, they are not. Human activity naturally adjusts to light, temperature, available shade, and the kind of work being performed. Tasks that can be done when conditions are cooler are easier on the body than the same tasks performed beneath the strongest sun. Rest is not laziness when heat is draining water and strength from you every minute. The sun becomes part of the schedule. You do not order it to obey your working hours. Your working hours must respect it. With powerful machines, you can try to make every hour feel the same. Without them, you become far more aware of when the environment is helping you and when it is fighting you. Eventually, the sun drops lower. The shadows stretch. The worst of the daytime heat begins to loosen its grip. You have made it through the day. Surely the house is now the perfect place to sleep. Not necessarily. Remember those thick walls that slowed the heat during the day? They may now be releasing some of the warmth they absorbed earlier, and the rooms that protected you from direct sunlight can still feel stuffy after hours of heat. So you look upward. Many ancient Egyptian houses had flat roofs, and roofs could serve as usable parts of domestic life, rather than empty surfaces that nobody visited. When the evening air is more comfortable than the air trapped below, the roof suddenly becomes extremely valuable. A mat, a sleeping place, open air, and the night sky can offer something no enclosed room can provide as easily. Air can move around you, heat can escape upward, and the place that was brutally exposed to the sun at noon can become one of the most pleasant places in the house after dark. That reversal is beautiful in its simplicity. During the day, you hide from the roof. At night, you climb toward it. As you lie beneath the stars, the entire system finally becomes visible. There was never one Egyptian air conditioner. The whole lifestyle was the air conditioner. The walls managed heat slowly. The layout created shade. The clothes protected the body. The jar used evaporation. The food and drink supported physical labor. The rhythm of the day changed with the sun. The roof became useful when the sky cooled. Each part was simple on its own. Together, they created resilience. But there is one weakness in this system that a wall cannot fix. Food has to arrive. Water has to be available. Workers have to receive the rations they depend on. And when that chain breaks, even people who know exactly how to live in the heat can reach a limit. To see what that limit looked like, travel to Deir el-Medina during the reign of Ramesses III. This was the community of skilled workers connected with the construction and decoration of royal tombs. These were not anonymous figures carved into a temple wall. They were real people with households, arguments, debts, meals, illnesses, jokes, and expectations. Their work was important enough to the state that their lives were supported through an organized ration system. Grain and other provisions were not casual gifts. They were part of the workers' compensation. Now imagine depending on that system and watching the delivery fail. A ration is late. Then another delay follows. The storeroom looks emptier. The household still needs food. The body still needs energy. The work has not become easier simply because payment has not arrived. At some point, the problem stops being an inconvenience. It becomes a question of survival and fairness. And then the workers do something extraordinary. They put down their tools. They stop working. They leave the places where they are expected to labor and make their complaint impossible to ignore. More than 3,000 years later, written records still preserve this confrontation. The workers protested because their rations had not been delivered properly and because hunger had become real. It is often described as one of the earliest recorded labor strikes in history. And suddenly, the story of surviving Egyptian heat becomes much larger than clever architecture or cool water jars. A civilization can build walls that slow heat. It can create shade. It can weave linen. It can bake bread and brew beer. But every survival system also depends on people keeping their promises to one another. If the worker does the labor but the food never arrives, no amount of ancient ingenuity can make that arrangement sustainable forever. That is why the strike matters to this story. It reveals the hidden structure beneath all the physical tricks we have been talking about. Survival was not only technological, it was social. The mud brick mattered, but so did the person who built the wall. The bread mattered, but so did the system that delivered the grain. The water jar mattered, but so did access to water. The roof mattered, but so did having a home to climb back to at night. Now return to the moment when you first opened your eyes that morning. The sun was rising, the air was warming, and you had none of the machines that define modern comfort. At first, ancient Egypt may have seemed almost impossible to survive. But after one full day, the logic becomes clear. The Egyptians did not need to make the entire desert comfortable. They only needed to make thousands of small decisions that reduced how much punishment the heat could deliver at once. Slow the heat before it enters the house. Block the sun before it reaches the body. Use breathable clothing instead of fighting the climate with heavy layers. Use evaporation when there is no compressor. Replace what the body loses through work. Respect the hottest hours instead of pretending they are harmless. Use the roof differently at night than you do at noon. And make sure the social system that supplies workers does not collapse when people depend on it most. None of these ideas alone looks revolutionary. That is exactly why the whole system is so impressive. The genius was not one spectacular machine hidden in a palace. It was ordinary knowledge spread across ordinary life. A wall here, a piece of linen there, a clay jar beside a doorway, a shaded courtyard, a ration of bread, a drink shared after work, a sleeping place under the stars. Small solutions repeated every day became the technology of survival. If you were dropped into ancient Egypt tomorrow, you might spend the first hour wishing desperately for an air conditioner. By sunset, you would begin to understand why the people around you were not waiting for one. They had already built their answer into the way they lived. They did not conquer the desert heat. They learned when to hide from it, when to move through it, when to store it, when to release it, and when to change their own behavior instead of trying to change the weather. And perhaps that is the most surprising lesson left behind by a civilization famous for monuments made to last forever. Sometimes survival is not about building one enormous thing. Sometimes it is about designing every small thing to work together.